This is Midwest Moxie, a show about our region's visionary founders and the experiences that shape them. I'm your host, Kathleen Gallagher, Executive Director of Five Lakes Institute. Aaron DiAntonio knew this was probably the most important discovery of his career. He and his colleague, Jeff Milbrandt, had identified a key protein that causes the axons in nerve cells to self-destruct. That meant they now had the knowledge to develop new drugs that could inhibit the protein and potentially treat peripheral neuropathy, multiple sclerosis, glaucoma, and other diseases. In 2016, Aaron and Jeff founded Disarm Therapeutics. The company raised $30 million, and in 2020 was acquired by Eli Lilly for $135 million. Aaron, welcome to Midwest Moxie.
Thank you.
You and Jeff made such a big discovery when you identified the true function of the SARM1 protein. Everyone else thought SARM1 was a scaffolding protein with no enzymatic activity. You determined it does have enzymatic activity. Tell us about the moment when you knew you'd figured it out.
It was glorious. So, we and others in the field knew that if we could find a way to inhibit this protein SARM1, it had the potential to treat a wide range of neurodegenerative disorders. But being a scaffold, which is what everyone assumed it was, made it a terrible drug target. We had spent a couple of years spinning our wheels in the lab, following up the idea that sort of was out there. And then, finally the data pointed us in this direction. Like, we knew there was an enzyme, we kept tracking it down deeper and deeper, and it kept pointing to SARM itself being that enzyme. And, there's not exactly a moment, because scientists always doubt, always think of like 3 ways we could be wrong. But it was really exciting. When we were finally sure, we knew, that this was it. We had a clear path now to developing a drug that might make a difference for people.
Yeah, so not only did you figure out its function, you figured out that you knew how to block the SARM1 enzyme. It's easier to block an enzyme, right?
Absolutely. So scaffolding proteins just basically stick to other proteins. It's really tough to develop drugs that block that kind of protein sticking to another protein. But many of the drugs on the market now are enzyme inhibitors. That's just, drug companies, drug hunters know how to develop enzyme inhibitors. And we, in fact, as soon as we figured out what was an enzyme, even though that's not our kind of main thing being drug hunters, we did a small drug screen in a lab, and we found a great inhibitor, and we could show it blocked axon degeneration. So we had proof of concept. We knew this was a druggable target that could help preserve axons in disease.
So big discovery, but big responsibility. Did you know right away that you wanted to, or needed to, maybe we should say, start a company?
We absolutely knew that it needed to be commercialized, and exactly how to do that, we were needed to figure out, is this something to license to a company, or is this something where we should really just try to, do it ourselves? And I think we just thought it was such a big target, with so many different potential diseases it could treat, that this was one where it was really worth putting in the extra effort to trying to kind of lead the effort ourselves.
So you're at Washington University, both of you are, and at Washington University has you had a lot of people you could go ask about this. There are inventors there that had had commercial success before. So you really milked the mentor network.
Oh, absolutely. We talked to everybody with great people like, Phil Needleman, who's the inventor of Celebrex, the people at our Office of Technology Management, our then provost, all had a lot of experience in helping people start companies, develop drugs. And there was this uniform kind of enthusiasm. People were really, excited for us and excited for what it could be, and lots of help. The Cortex district here in St. Louis is sort of a burgeoning kind of biotech startup area. We also got a lot of advice from them, and that was super helpful. They made some really good connections for us.
And biogenerators and other organizations?
Yes, absolutely. We spoke to the folks at Biogenerator.
So somehow Atlas Venture, which is a Boston venture firm, reached out to you. They heard about it and reached out to you. You narrowed down to them. What made you think that they were the people to start the company with?
Yeah, so we we spoke to a number of professional venture capitalists, and one thing that really stood out with Atlas was how on top of the science they were. They had actually read background papers. They understood why this was such an exciting sort of prospect. And I have to say, other venture capitalists we spoke to kind of hadn't put in that homework. So that was part of the appeal. And the other part of the appeal was they've done this many times before. They start 5 or 10 companies a year, usually with academic founders, and they had a really great playbook, and we could see they'd had a lot of successes before.
So once you settled on Atlas, though, that meant you were both going to stay at WashU. You were going to have less control over the company. You were going to have the headquarters of your company in Massachusetts in Cambridge, which is Atlas's home territory. Did you ever think, well, maybe we should do it ourselves and maybe we should do it in St. Louis?
We certainly did think about it, and we would have loved to do it. But when we spoke to people, and this is probably not as true as it was back in 2016, but there's the scientific talent to, start a great biotech in St. Louis, but there's much less executive talent. And what Atlas could offer was, bringing in the chief business officer, the, chief executive officer, having the connections to all the big pharma who'd be the most likely, merger partner eventually. And so that it just seemed was really, really hard to replicate here. And I think that Jeff and I appreciate, like, we know what we're good at, we know what we're not good at. We still had day jobs we loved. And so trust Atlas to, really drive the business part. And then we were still able to contribute a lot on the science side.
Funny thing about being in the Midwest, you ended up selling to Eli Lilly, which is in Indiana, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It came home.
You see the gaps better now, what we need to build up in the region, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk about you. You had a college roommate, David Cowan. He's a venture capitalist at Bessemer. And he was one of the people you tapped for advice because you're sitting here in the Midwest. They've done this a million times before. How do you know how to negotiate with them? And he gave you some good advice, right?
He absolutely did. Yeah, he was super helpful. He also connected me with one of his biotech colleagues. But he gave a lot of advice. Probably the single part that was most important is he really pushed us to be on the board of directors of the company. And this was something that Atlas said they really didn't do with scientific founders. But we, pushed back. And what David had said was, you really want a seat at the table when the big decisions are being made, partially to, be sure you can kind of keep your best interests there, but also because, this is your baby and you want to be involved. And so in the end, we negotiated for one voting board seat and one observer seat. So we both were there in all the meetings. We got all the documents. We saw how all the decisions were made, and we got to participate in those decisions. So certainly I learned a ton from that, and was really great to not only be doing the science part, but to at least be involved on the business side as well.
Did you feel like there were moments when it was really important that you were there?
Um, yes, I think there were. I mean, there were certainly times when I think we could sort of advocate for the broader kind of shareholder base, in a way that maybe if it were only venture capitalists around the table wouldn't have come up as much.
So you guys had this ability to see what was going on at a board level, but you were involved in other ways as well, right?
We were really involved on the science side, and that was super fun. I learned a ton about how science gets done in biotech. I had some probably biases that academics might have. But the work was done through contract research organizations, which I had never appreciated sort of how high quality that science could be, thinking, oh, they're just kind of guns for hire. But these people really cared, were really smart, worked super hard. And so what Jeff and I did is every 2 weeks, we'd spend Thursday morning with the team at Disarm and with the various scientists at the different contract research organizations. This was pre-Zoom, but we were still using kind of methods to all meet from basically across the world. And it was sort of like a lab meeting, which is what we scientists do with our own labs. Every week you get together, you talk about data. So we would get together, we would see raw data, we'd give suggestions, we'd help plot strategy. But at the end of the day, as you said, we did give up control. So although you called it our company, I think we realized that when we made this connection with Atlas, it really wasn't our company anymore. We were still important, but it was Atlas's company, and we were key stake helpers. But yeah, we had to kind of give up on the idea that it was ours.
You mentioned contract research organizations. Let's go back a minute. When you were first talking to Atlas, they were kind of pausing in the negotiations, and you used a contract research organization to get them more interested. Tell what happened.
Yeah, this was really interesting. So I have sort of subsequently learned that often people in the sort of biotech world don't have full faith in academics and basically how kind of reproducible our data is, or how much there's some special sauce that only an academic lab has. And it's going to be hard to export it and miniaturize it and basically commercialize the key assets that we had. So we got a little bit of money from WashU from sort of an entrepreneurial program they had here. And what we did with that money is we took kind of our key discovery. SARM is an enzyme, and we can screen for drugs to find inhibitors. And we worked with a local biotech company in the Cortex district, and we taught them our assay. They got it working. They were got it to work in sort of a high throughput format. And basically, they replicated everything we did. They proved it was transferable. And literally the day after that data was sent to Atlas is when the contracts came through, sort of making it all official. So I can't know for sure that's why it happened the next day, but it sure felt like that. That was some external validation that they really needed to see.
That's the term I was just going to use, external validation, right? So I went and looked at Eli Lilly's website and saw that they have a SARM1 inhibitor drug in phase one. Well, they have two of them in phase one trials, which is great news for you and the investors because we know that they paid $135 million for the company, but that amount could go as high as $1.2 billion if this starts working and if it meets certain milestones. Do you keep tabs on that?
Uh, I'm obviously very curious. I certainly still feel like it's my baby. But once Lilly bought the company and after some transition time, they're very good at doing clinical trials. They're very good at all the chemistry sort of stuff. And so we really haven't been very involved anymore, which is tough. So they occasionally give us tidbits of information, but mainly I'm just kind of keeping my fingers crossed that this will help patients.
Are you happy you did it this way? That you ended up using Atlas and
Absolutely. I think if we look at it from the lens of what was the best way to get a really exciting discovery to patients as quickly as possible, I think this was the right choice by using Atlas that had the playbook for starting a company and like for then moving it along to a partner who could really get it into people and figure out if it works. And then Lilly, obviously Lilly is great at what they do. So if this drug is going to work, they're going to be able to figure it out and get it to people all over the world. So yes, although there were moments that were challenging, overall, absolutely, this was, I think, the right way for this discovery to move forward.
well, and silver lining, it gave you time to work on your next discovery, which we'll be watching to see.
There you go. We're hard at work, I can promise.
Thanks so much for sharing your story, Aaron. It was really fascinating to hear about it.
Great. Thanks for your interest.
You can read more about today's guest by visiting WUWM.com. Don't forget, you can listen to the show as a podcast if you'd like to take us on the go. Just search for Midwest Moxie wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Kathleen Gallagher. Midwest Moxie was created by executive producer Audrey Nowakowski and me. Today's episode was produced by Audrey Nowakowski and engineered by WUWM's Jason Reevy. Join us next Sunday at 7 p.m. to hear from more visionary Midwestern founders building innovative companies. That's right here on 89.7, Milwaukee's NPR. Support for Midwest Moxie comes from Microsoft, whose efforts to drive technology development across the Midwest and beyond include its National TechSpark community engagement work, which started in Wisconsin, its role as co-founder of Titletown Tech in Green Bay, and its new AI co-innovation lab at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. More information is available at Microsoft.com. And from Quarles & Brady, LLP, a multidisciplinary Am Law 200 firm with approximately 550 attorneys who support large and small businesses, from Fortune 500 companies to startups and entrepreneurs across the country. More at Quarles.com.